Hey, fun fans! We're giving away a Devastator 3 keyboard and mouse combo courtesy of Cooler Master on YouTube for this month of June. All you have to do to enter is subscribe to Fun's YouTube channel and leave a comment on which state or region you think will be the next to go to districts. You can enter once per upload, and we'll pick a winner near the end of June.
Shut up and sit down.
Moving on to a non-controversial topic, no mysteries here, but just a good debate about excellence in first. And this is it was just a great thread on Chief that was started by Warren Bartlett. And it was just like, sometimes, like most of the time, Chief is just a train wreck and it's just awful. But it was like a data-driven discussion on the greatest Einstein streaks. So, everyone knows about 2056's 23 regional win streak and 254 going undefeated this year. But there's been two Einstein streaks where teams have gone to Einstein 6 times in a row. Team 177 from 2006 to 2011, Bobcat Robotics from New England, got to Einstein every single year by winning their division. They've won championship twice in that spread, and they were a finalist as well. 2 years later, Team 1678, everyone who's a part of the program right now is definitely familiar with. Einstein 6 times in a row, starting in 2013. They were the number 1 seed on Curie. I refer to it as the Curie Cluster F. Not that they were the number 1, but what happened in alliance selection. They got declined 4 times by 1717, 2056, 1310, and 359. 148 finally accepted them. The division was burned. They move on to Einstein winning their division. And they've been to Einstein every year since then. So you think about these two teams, they have generations of kids who don't know what it's like to sit in the stands at champs during Einstein, because they're always competing on Einstein. 6 years in a row. It's just phenomenal. 254 hasn't done it. 1114 hasn't done it. 469 hasn't done it. 67 hasn't done it. Like, this is massive. And so, looking at these two streaks, Libby, which one do you think is more impressive?
Oh, so I have a cop-out answer.
Go for it. Cop-out answers are great.
It's my favorite kind. I'm not sure that one is more impressive than the other because they're totally different eras of first. And I think that's kind of what we want to talk about. And I know something that you brought up you wanted to talk about in this discussion, but it's like, of course, we all were in the community at this point. It's 2018. We've all seen our first community as it is right now. And students in the program right now, if you're currently a student or you're a student recently, that you're, that this is the team that's been on Einstein every single freaking year that you've been here. But 177 is this totally different era of the competition, different qualifications, different event structures. As an old schooler, I lean a little bit further towards Bobcat because it was one of those things, as a student, I was like, oh my God, that's the team we need to be. How do we become like Bobcat? But at the same time, as lead mentor now on 1923, I'm looking at wow, a really huge gold star of success is 1678. Obviously, what do we do to be like them? And so my lean is toward Bobcat because I'm a little bit old school and I kind of miss that era of first. And I always thought that was so very impressive. But what I want to see, and I really want to understand to be able to analyze the two different streaks, is those two different teams' process, right? How did they get to that point? How did they get to being these crazy winning teams in first? And obviously, like I said, these are two very different versions of FRC that we're playing in and two different worlds. And I want to know what each of those teams did to be the winning Einstein every year team that they were. And especially in the case of 177 is what changes adjusted to lose that streak, right? What were the successes and what were the failures across those two seasons? And that's we're looking at the stats as a very data-driven Chief thread, but I want to hear the stories behind the stats. And I want to know why teams ended up succeeding or failing and creating these streaks and ending these streaks. And that's what I'm interested in more than whose is more impressive.
So, I lived through both, but I think I can talk more about the 177 one because I think a lot of people aren't aware. But I think a lot of this discussion comes down to on how you define what's more impressive. I have a lot of random thoughts on this. 1678 was clearly more dominant in their run. They were always on the number one alliance, basically. Or I think maybe they were on the number two alliance this year, but it says they were always so. On 11-14, the goal at championship is to be on the number one alliance as the captain or as the first pick. That's what we kind of refer to as dominating an event. And we were very, very proud that from 2006 to 2015, every year we were on the number one alliance or we declined the number one alliance. And the one year we weren't, we were on the number two alliance, and it worked out perfectly because 2056 was the number two seed. So it was like that's what we refer to as the hallmark. So 1678, just being on the number one alliance over and over again is super, super hard. And then executing and getting to Einstein every year. That's crazy. But like the Bobcat streak just defied explanation because they kept doing it from the most random sorts of ways. Like a couple years they were the captain of the number one and number two alliance, but sometimes they would slip super far in alliance selection. And it's like, how are the Bobcats falling that far? Because the joke used to be at championship. It's like, yeah, like in that era, you get the champs like, just make sure you pick the Bobcats in the second round. Just make sure you pick them. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they must have had good luck to get to Einstein every year from those low positions when they were the second picks. But like, no, the Bobcats had the best strategy every year. Like their strategy crew was so good that they could just add that extra element to these alliances. And so like the Bobcats, it was mind-boggling that it kept happening. And like, you would see it's like the alliances would come out on Saturday afternoon and you'd be like, so, okay, well, how are the Bobcats going to get to Einstein this year? Like, who are they going to knock off? How are they going to make this happen? And it was just so cool to be a part of. Getting to Einstein was a lot harder back then, simply because, yes, first has grown, but X number of teams get the championship. But back then, only 12 made it to Einstein. Now 48 make it to Einstein. Like it's crazy. Like honestly, a lot of the top teams talk about this now, that getting to Einstein isn't all as impressive as it used to be because like there's a lot of filler there. And yeah, I know that's weird to say, and it sounds like really arrogant and cocky, but like it's different. A 48 team Einstein is very different than a 12 team Einstein. But the 1678 streak is like, they've had a top 5 or 10 robot in the world for 6 straight years, which is impressive enough. When teams like 67 or 11-14 or 2056 have been able to claim that, that's been crazy good. But then to take that and then execute every year to get to Einstein and not have bad luck, not have a mechanical breakdown that takes you down. Like on 11-14 that we had in 2013 when our hangar just broke. Like that's part of the game. That consistency to continually, like that's super impressive. That applies to the Bobcats too. But at the same time also, 1678, they were like one of the workhorses on the alliance every time. Well, the Bobcats not, like if you think back to some of their past Einstein appearances, they weren't always the workhorse, which, affects things as well. They're both super impressive. I think 1678's robots were definitely more dominant than the Bobcat robots over that time, but like just what the Bobcats pulled off to get there was just like, it was, and I mean, like we always used to joke, it's like how, like when the Bobcats would get to Einstein as like a low pick in the draft, you just be like, how did someone else not pick them earlier? Like, why did that not happen? But like the Bobcats just turned like, and teams would just be like, they didn't look that great in qualifying. And
yeah,
but that was the whole thing about the Bobcats. They were geared for Saturday afternoon. They were geared for the elims, and like that's what their whole season was based around. If you look at the regional performances in those years, it wasn't that great either. But like their goal, it was like go big or go home. They cared about winning champs or getting to Einstein, and that was just, I don't know. It was a very cool streak to see, and like. And it's not like they disappeared completely afterwards. Like the Bobcats are still a team, but they're in the elims. It's like I don't want to play them. Like like they're going to come up with something. And it's like some teams. The Thunder Chickens have been to Einstein a bunch of times, and now 3310 has been close since Paul's taken over there. It's like people agree in first, like you don't want to play Paul Copioli in the elimination rounds. It's like he's one of the best strategists in first, and he always comes up with something. It's like you just don't want to deal. I remember 2 years ago, 11-14 and 6-10, when we were up against, like everyone was talking about 1986 that year. We're like, and they have Paul, and like they're going to come up with something. And it's like it's frustrating like that. And that's what the Bobcats were. It's like, oh, what are the Bobcats going to come up with? So, like it's, it's as a strategy guy, and I've always said like a strategy can take you that extra mile. 177 was living proof of that, and so I think that's why I really am partial to that streak. But at the same time, 1678 has definitely been the more dominant team. And also with the 1678 streak, I think most people would argue, if you look in the last 6 years from 2013 to 2018, if you look at 254 and 1678, people would argue that 254 has had better robots than 1678, that they've been a bit more dominant that way. And that makes 1678's streak more impressive to me. It's like they were able to overcome that and just not fall misfortune to anything crazy. And like a lot of that is controlling your own destiny with preparation. And some of that is luck. Like, I mean, 254 and 1241 having to play an extra match because they got DQ'd because they walked onto the field with a tether, and then their controller fell off this wall at Autonomous and they picked it up, and getting 2 yellow cards for that and getting DQ'd, and then having to play an extra match where 1241 then gets broken in that extra match. Like that's just like bad luck. But like 1678 avoided that too. I don't know. These streaks are super cool. I could talk about the history of these streaks for like hours, like I just did. And so I'm sure and no one's even listening anymore. So I don't know. But hey, it was cool stuff. So
I think it's so interesting to see the perspective of like I said, of these two different eras, right? And when I was 177 was really strong when I was I was going to say when I was a student, but also when I was a mentor, but like when my teams weren't good. And so I never got the opportunity to play like against Bobcats. And so it was always this crazy, like I said, this admiration of like, this is where I want to be. This is where I want to be one day. And I think what's cool is that regardless of where the dominant streak is, all of these teams are teams that you look up to and you want to be a part of them, no matter what era of FRC you're playing in. That's a team that you want to learn from.
I would say this, like if you want to like pin me on something, if you were to ask me which streak I would rather have for my own team, I would rather have the 1678 streak, because I really do value being that top team in the division each year at championship. But on the other hand, I think the Bobcat streak might be more fun to be a part of because of like the strategy that was involved and being the underdog and pulling upsets and that sort of thing. I don't know. It's all cool stuff.